So it was, I guess, 3 years ago that I got to do this with a book called Preaching Politics in the spring of 2016. That book was kind of the culmination of some doctoral work done at Sewanee, the University of the South, talking about where faith and politics intersect. And also, as a minister, how you teach and preach in a politically diverse context, which is what I get to experience at Woodmont here down the road. I think most of you, but if there's a few of you that I don't know, I was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, so a native of West Tennessee. I went to Texas Christian University for my undergrad, did my degree as a double major in religion and sociology, and then I went to seminary at Princeton Theological Seminary up in New Jersey. Jersey gets a bad rap, but I actually enjoyed the time that I spent up there in the Garden State, lived in New York. I worked at a church in New York and kind of went back and forth while I was up there. Had a short stint in Switzerland, finished at Princeton, came back to Memphis in 2005, and then I was called to come to Nashville in 2007 when I was 27 years old. So I actually dedicated this new book called Spiritual Reflections on Faith, Values, and Culture to my family, my wife Megan, who's here, and then my three children, Montgomery, Clayton, and Wade, but also to the members of Woodmont, because Woodmont did something that was pretty unprecedented. They hired a 27-year-old senior minister back in 2007, and that doesn't happen all the time, so I'll always be grateful for that. So to those of you that are part of the church, this book was dedicated to you. What gave me the idea for this book, and I just want to kind of give you a background, and then I'm going to share a couple of parts from it. For probably 7 or 8 years now, I've had a fairly regular column in the Tennessean. It runs on Saturdays in the Faith and Values section. And so I write about different things, mostly Christianity, spirituality, culture, meaning, purpose, and where all of those things kind of intersect. That is kind of my passion and my interest. And so that's what I've been doing for a number of years, and it's usually twice a month. Sometimes it'll be 3 times a month, but it's roughly every other week. And that's been an opportunity for me to minister to a larger group of people that are not just in my church where I serve. And Nashville's got lots of great churches, lots of great ministers, and so I've been able to build relationships and connections with a number of people through that article. So what gave me the idea for this book was taking a number of those pieces that I have written and that have been published over the years and combining them with some new material that aligns with the same topic, and then putting that into a book, into book form. So some of these articles, if you do read the Tennessean, I find that there's some of the younger folks don't, unless it ends up on social media, but you'll recognize some of the pieces and chapters in this book, and then others are new. So this is not to be not a spoiler alert, but I'm gonna hold this so I can just kind of move around. So this is kind of how I start the book, and if you've read it, then you know this, and if you haven't read it, you can skip the introduction because I'm going to tell you about it. So I moved back to Nashville to Memphis in 2005. Finished my Master of Divinity at Princeton Seminary, and I came from a family. I was the oldest of 4 children. My dad is here tonight. My stepmother Ann is here. Also my brother John, and sitting next to Megan. But we had like many families, we had to go through a really difficult situation. My mother had battled significant depression for many years, and part of the reason that I moved back to Memphis, my parents were divorced. I wanted to work at my home church with my dad. I also wanted to be there to try to help my mother. And, those of you that are at Woodmont, you've heard me talk about it. But basically, I begin the book this way. It was September the 2nd, 2005. And I was at the airport in Memphis, boarding a flight to fly out to Norman, Oklahoma, because TCU, my alma mater, was playing the University of Oklahoma in football. And so I was going out to meet some of my college buddies, and we were going to go to the game and spend the weekend. So this was Labor Day 2005. I get a phone call from my sister, as I'm about to walk on the plane, have my ticket in hand, about to line up, and my sister is hysterical. She's crying, and basically what had happened is she had gone to our childhood home, and she found there was a note from my mom. It was a suicide note, and it basically was something along the lines of, Clay Carr, John and Jordan, I love you so much. Life's become too hard, and so she called me, and at that point I knew that one of two things either happened. We either gonna have to go get my mother and check her back into a hospital. She'd been hospitalized a couple times before, or I was gonna be heading back and planning her funeral. And that the second part is what we ended up doing. My mom had taken her own life. That was really hard for our family. It's hard to even sit here and talk about it. Hard for my dad and brother to hear it. That was 3 months after I finished seminary, I'd been ordained into the ministry, and there was a part of me that was like, man, thanks God, after serving you and kind of giving my life to follow you and answering the call, and this is what I get. This is what I'm left dealing with, and it was a really hard time. And I thought about getting out. I thought about going back to law school. I thought about going and getting a PhD. I thought about saying I'm just not really up for this right now. But ultimately, I made the decision that no, I'm not getting out. And this is my particular story of the pain that our family's been through. But I said, you know what? Everybody has their story to tell. Everybody has their pain and their burdens that they've been through. And so I kind of took Henry Nouwen's approach and wanted to become a wounded healer. I wanted to become somebody who used my own pain, my own hurt, to go and minister to other people. And that's what I did. And I haven't regretted it. And 2 years later, I got called to come to Nashville and to lead a very large congregation. And I've been there now for 11 and a half years, which is really amazing to think about how fast time flies. But one of the things you figure out when you're in the ministry is you figure out how much pain and hurt there is in our culture. That every family, every person has a story to tell. And so whether it's the person whose son has dropped out of college and has had to check into rehab, or whether it's the person whose husband left them with 3 kids to raise for another person, or whether it's somebody who's battling terminal cancer, everybody has a story to tell, and everybody hurts. And when you do what I do for a living, when you're a pastor, a minister, a priest, a rabbi, you see that, and there's nothing. It can be overwhelming, but there's nothing that feels better than trying to help people work through their hurt and work through their pain, and help them understand how they can grow spiritually from what they go through. And so that, in a nutshell, that's how I start the book. And so, you can read it, but if you haven't read it, that won't come as a surprise. And I really do believe that all of us become stronger in life when we go through hard times. And it's not that we choose those hard times, it's not that we want them, but I believe that we become stronger when we go through hard times. This book is divided up into 6 basic sections, and a few of them are longer than others. But the sections are Wisdom for Life is the first section, Values, Christianity, Spirituality, Politics and American Culture is the 5th section, and then the 6th, I just kind of chime in on some current events. Most of those were op-eds that have been published in the Tennessean on events that have happened in recent years. Mass shootings, what happened in Charleston, what happened in, there's a lot of them. So that's kind of how the book is laid out. What I want to do is I want to read a couple of excerpts from the book, and then I will take some questions. And then if you want me to sign your book, I'm happy to do it, and we'll have some wine and food. So this is from the first section. It's called Wisdom. And this is the 12th chapter. There's like 6 sections and 12 chapters, but don't There's 100 and something chapters, but they're all pretty short, okay? So don't let that overwhelm you. This is called Choosing to Grow Through Pain. An undeniable reality of being human is that pain and suffering are inevitable. We all hurt. We all suffer. We all experience loss and grief. Some hurt more than others, but there is simply no way to avoid it. The most difficult part of any minister's job is helping people work through their pain. Divorce, addiction, depression, loneliness, infidelity, financial hardship, fear, worry, and relentless anxiety are all real problems in our complicated world. Thich Nhat Hanh has a book called The Art of Living, in which he says many of us want to do something to help the world suffer less. We see so much violence and poverty and environmental destruction all around us, but if we are not peaceful, if we don't have enough compassion, then we can't do much to help. We ourselves are the center. We have to make peace and reduce the suffering, and ourselves first, because we represent the world. Peace, compassion, and well-being begin with ourselves. This is a truth that many overlook. Jesus commands to love others as we love ourselves, and I am convinced that many people are doing just that. They are hurting others because they are hurting inside themselves. It's a vicious and dangerous cycle. It's only when we first tend to our own soul and healing that we can then tend to others. Most of the time when people lash out in anger, there's something going on inside. They are simply projecting the way that they are feeling. Hurting people will hurt others. But the question still remains, how do we grow through our pain? How does it change us? How does it make us stronger? With every challenge of life comes a new opportunity for growth. That's chapter 12. This is from the Christianity section, which is the third section, and this is chapter 44. And I'm just going to read a portion of this. And the title of this is "What Does It Mean to Live in Faith?" I think that there's a lot of distorted versions out there about what it means to be a person of faith, what it means to be a Christian. There's a lot of stereotypes, and there's a lot of different types of Christians, as we all know. So that's what this is titled, "What Does It Mean to Live in Faith?" Many misunderstandings exist in our culture as to what it means to live a life of faith. At its very core, this question lies at the heart of all theology, a field that will never be exhausted or mastered. Having faith in God does not mean that everything in life will work out just the way that we plan. It does not mean that we will be spared hardship and pain, tragedy and suffering. Faith in God does not mean simply biding our time and waiting to go to heaven one day when we die. It does not mean that there is a master puppeteer in the sky orchestrating our every move. Humans do have free will. Bad things do happen to all of us. Pain and suffering are real. So then what is faith, and what does it mean to be a person of faith? The writer of the Hebrews gives this definition: faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. According to these words, faith and hope are intertwined, two sides of the same coin, perhaps inseparable. St. Augustine once said that faith is to believe what you do not see. The reward of this faith is to see what you believe. Thomas Aquinas once said, "To one who has faith, no explanation is necessary. To one without faith, no explanation is possible." Charles Spurgeon preached that faith obliterates time, annihilates distance, and brings future things at once into its possession. Emmanuel Tenney once argued that as our faith is strengthened, we will find that there is no longer a need to have a sense of control. Things will flow as they will, and to our great delight and benefit, we will flow with them. The truth is, there is no one definitive definition of faith. Faith is a way of being, a way of living, a way of approaching the future. That's chapter 44. The next section is on spirituality, and I fully recognize that we now live in a culture where a lot of people say, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. And I've always said, well, how can you be religious without being spiritual? I think that it all goes together. But this is a chapter that's called 7 Enemies of the Heart. And basically, I identify 7 emotions that I think are dangerous, toxic, but they're emotions that all of us deal with on a regular basis. So I'll read part of this. Most people believe that the spiritual life matters. Even those who reject organized religion will tell you that they believe in the importance of spiritual growth and formation. However, we live in challenging times where there are many obstacles to achieving spiritual growth and inner peace. These obstacles need to be named because in many ways they serve as enemies of the heart. The first obstacle is fear. We live in a culture of fear. The politicians use that fear to control us. Fear keeps us in a state of uncertainty because we never know what might happen next. Fear can be crippling and even paralyzing, sucking away our quality of life and our ability to enjoy the present. A second obstacle is anger, which seems to be the direct result of fear. In a highly polarized and contentious culture where partisanship has become toxic and even deadly, anger is real. We see it all around us. Einstein once said, "Anger dwells only in the bosom of fools." Emerson said, "For every minute of anger, you lose 60 seconds of happiness." But I think Aristotle put it best when he said, anybody can become angry, that's easy. But to be angry with the right person and to the right degree and at the right time and for the right purpose and in the right way, that is not within everybody's power, and that is not easy. Acting out in anger is usually a bad idea. The third obstacle is envy, much of it resulting from major socioeconomic divides within the culture. Arthur Brooks of the American Enterprise Institute once said, "We must recognize that fomenting bitterness over income differences may be powerful politics, but it injures our nation. We need aspirational leaders willing to do the hard work of uniting Americans around an optimistic vision in which anyone can earn his or her success. This will never happen when we vilify the rich or give up on the poor. Envy is dangerous. It's a dangerous road to travel because there's always somebody who has more. Envy is often the result of ingratitude and a lack of contentment. The fourth obstacle is lust. Lust has destroyed many marriages and families, and decisions are made in just a few short moments and can have a lifelong consequence. Lust has become even more common in our culture, a culture that glorifies sex and ignores boundaries. The fifth obstacle is resentment. Failure to forgive and to let go of the past keeps many people in unnecessary bondage. Some are better than others at letting go of the past. The sixth obstacle is negativity. Psychologists have confirmed that our brains tend to automatically remember negative situations and criticisms, but it takes a much more concentrated effort to focus on what is good and positive. Negativity becomes a downward cycle, and there is nothing worse than two negative people feeding off of each other. The final enemy of the heart is materialism, turning to things to satisfy spiritual longings. This is age-old, but it never works. Of course we all enjoy nice things, but houses, cars, clothing, jewelry, and money do not satisfy our deepest spiritual hunger. That hunger can only be satisfied by God, by relationships, love, and acceptance. That was chapter 72. One thing I'll say about this book is the way that it's laid out, and I think a lot of people will appreciate this. It's not a book you have to read cover to cover. It's a book that you can turn to the section or turn to the chapter that interests you, and you can read it, and you don't have to read from, and you're welcome to read from cover to cover. I'd love for you to, but you don't have to. And I think, a lot of times people will say, well, I don't have time to read a whole book. Well, with this book, you don't have to. This was, the last piece I want to read is from the Politics and American Culture section. And like I told you, I did my doctoral work at Sewanee focused on the intersection of religion and politics, which is like a big, jumbled up, hot mess, right? But I find both of those things very interesting. And I find I've always been very much intrigued by, what is it that makes people liberal? What is it that makes people conservative? What makes people Democrat, Republican, and then I'm also very much haunted. And when I published the Preaching Politics book, it actually came out on Super Tuesday when we found out that our two presidential choices were Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And I was like, man, I knew that this topic was timely, but holy smokes, this is unbelievable. But this chapter, in chapter 89, was actually an article that was published in the Tennessean exactly 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago to the day, it was the day of Donald Trump's inauguration. And it was interesting, it was published, I think it was a Friday, and it was like trending on the Tennessean as the top article, which was a little bit terrifying. Oh my, what are people going to think when they read this? So I'll share it with you. And remember, I wrote this 2 years ago, and this was not an attempt to be partisan at all. This was just an attempt to just shed some light on the moment that our nation found itself in. So this is chapter 89 from the from the culture, politics and American culture. 1 year ago, very few Republicans or Democrats would have guessed that Donald J. Trump would be elected and sworn in as the 45th President of the United States. What he has managed to accomplish, politically speaking, defied all odds and predictions. He proved political pundits and scientists to be dead wrong. He promised to shake things up and managed to connect with struggling Americans in ways that seasoned politicians of both parties simply could not. His administration is now underway, and an interesting one it will surely be. Unpredictable, unscripted, and outside the box, to say the least. David Brooks, not one of Trump's advocates, talks about the difference between resume virtues and eulogy virtues. Resume virtues are the skills that we bring to the marketplace, the things that we learn in school, the things that help us get jobs and progress in our careers. Resume virtues are very important in terms of upward mobility and economic opportunity. Eulogy virtues are the things that preachers talk about at funerals, and these are not necessarily dependent upon resume virtues. It's whether you are kind, loving, devoted to your family, compassionate, and a person of character. Throughout his life, many would say that Donald Trump has managed to compile an impressive secular resume. He's built a global real estate empire and made billions of dollars. He's bought hotels, resorts, casinos, and skyscrapers. He's become a name brand, a celebrity, and lives in a luxurious penthouse high above Fifth Avenue. He's been a reality TV star and has run Miss Universe pageants all over the world. And now he adds to that resume, President of the United States. He was elected by the people and has now been given the chance to do the job. Trump's challenge, it appears, will be a spiritual one, having to do with temperament, patience, faith, peacemaking, self-control, character, and bridge building. Some of his strongest supporters would even agree. The truth is, we all face this spiritual challenge every day. It's a part of being human. Some master it better than others. Trump will quickly realize that no president has the time, energy, or need to respond to every criticism that comes his way. When you study previous presidents, from Lincoln to FDR, Reagan to Obama, it becomes clear that all of them were forced to develop a spiritual life, an inner sanctuary. The presidency not only ages you quickly, but it drives you to your knees. Up to this point, Trump has taken on the world like a one-man wrecking crew. He is bold, tough, unafraid, and unapologetic. He has offended many while gaining a strong following in the process. However, the way Trump campaigned and even won the White House may not necessarily prove to be an effective method for leading the free world. Time will tell. Yes, Trump will be Trump, but he will soon discover why presidents age so quickly during their short time in office. The presidency will humble him, as it has done to those before him. And this is where his spiritual challenge will lie. He will have many opportunities to show compassion, mercy, forgiveness, and grace. The choice will be his to make. If he can rise to the spiritual challenge, he might discover what Alex de Tocqueville meant when he said the greatness of America lies not in being more enlightened than any other nation, but rather in her ability to repair her faults. Everybody is watching. So 2 years ago, on the inauguration, Trump's inauguration, on January 28, 2017. I assume that everybody that's here, whether you would consider yourself a Christian or whether you would say you are a religious person, my guess is that your spiritual life is important to you. And I believe that as human beings, I believe that we're spiritual beings. I believe that matters of the soul are important. And I've always been amazed. We know what it takes to take care of our bodies, right? We know that we're supposed to exercise. We know that we're supposed to diet. I've always said, not one of my strong suits, taking care of my physical body. I'm working on that, by the way. But very few people, or fewer people, far fewer people, are willing to do what it takes to take care of their spiritual life. And that is to take care of their soul, to nurture their soul, to pay attention to matters of the heart, to pay attention to how we interact with each other, to invest in friendships, invest in relationships, to actually have the priorities that we say are our priorities, to let our time and our energy and our money reflect those. And so this book is really, it covers a lot of ground. But it's for anybody who wants kind of an aid or a guide in growing spiritually and reflecting on issues of the soul. And I think that includes all of us, because I think all of us would say that our spiritual life is important. And no matter what type of Christian we are, no matter what faith we come from, denomination, background, I think that if you neglect issues of the soul, it catches up with you. And obviously in our culture, and I see a number of physicians that are here tonight, people are turning to all kinds of things to fill spiritual voids. So we have an opioid addiction that is not just rampant in Tennessee, but it's rampant throughout the country. We have people that drink far too much, and I've always been kind of fascinated by that question. Where's the line between the person that can drink a certain amount and knows when to stop, and the person that goes over the line and drinks too much? There's a lot of gray in there, but a lot of people turn to alcohol to soothe the pain. We have people that are addicted to all kinds of things, and my conclusion is that our culture continues to turn to the wrong things to fill spiritual voids. We had Fred Craddock preach at Woodmont a number of years ago, and Fred was a famous preacher, named one of the top 10 preachers in the English-speaking world. He passed away a couple of years ago. But on that same day, we had another guy, he was a friend of mine named Dick Ham, preach, and I remember his sermon. Fred's sermon was called Jesus Saves. Dick Ham's sermon was called Black Hole Syndrome. And what Dick said in that sermon was, he says, all of us have this black hole, and he says we throw everything under the sun into it. So whether it's alcohol or drugs or sex or opioids or shopping for material things or work. Some people's drug of choice is to be workaholic. There's only God can fill that hole, and only spiritual growth and care can take that void away. And so I think for all of us, that's one of our main challenges, is how do we tend to our spiritual lives? How do we grow spiritually? I like to tell Woodmont folks that if you want a litmus test on the spiritual life, go look at what the Apostle Paul writes to the Galatians, where he says, here's what the flesh does, and here's what the Spirit does. He calls them the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Those are the things that all of us should want to embody in our lives, in our marriages, in our families, in our friendships, in our churches, in our community. And typically we can look at that list and we can identify one or two that we know we need to get more of. Some will say, well, I need all those. I need more of all those. But that is the litmus test, I think, for how we're doing in terms of the spiritual life. And then I'll kind of wrap up with where I started, and then I'll open it up for questions. In this group there'll be some questions. I really do believe that pain and struggle in life. For me, it was the suicide of my mother, but for you, it could be fill in the blank. Anytime we go through pain and struggle in life, it gives us a chance to grow, and it gives us a chance to form character. I don't know where we got this idea that life is supposed to be easy and pain-free. I don't know where that came from, because it's just not true. Anybody that's lived long enough knows that that's not true. And so I think that, the message, that I do talk a lot about resilience in the first section, and what resilience looks like, and how we grow through pain, and how we use our pain to build character and to make us stronger. It's one of the reasons I like reading David Brooks. I think David Brooks does a good job of tapping into this subject. What are you doing to grow as a person, to develop your eulogy virtues? But no matter what we go through in life, I think there's a couple of things that should be reassuring to us. The first is that we don't go through anything alone. You know, if you're a believer, you know that God is present, but also you have friends and family and a community that's present, so we get to shoulder, you know, all of our journeys with other people, right? The second thing is I believe that we can take some of the worst situations and turn them into opportunities. Saturday night, there's a guy by the name of Blake McMeans, and he'll speak at the Hutton Hotel. I serve on Blake's board, but some of you may know his story. He was he was a world-class tennis player recruited by all kinds of colleges, and Blake went out partying, had too much to drink, drove his car off the road, and had suffered major head trauma, would never play tennis again. But he lived. He was in a coma 4 months, and he lived. Blake has now taken that horrific situation, and he travels around the state and around the country, and he talks to young people about the dangers of drinking and driving, the dangers of texting and driving, the importance of making good choices. And so he's taken this bad situation and he's turned it into an opportunity to inspire and to help other people. And so I do think that when bad things happen to us, you know, those can be used to help and to inspire other people. And then the last thing that I'll say is to kind of look at this book. There's a guy named Peter, I don't know if it's Scazzaro or Cesaro, but he lives in New York. He's a pastor up there. He wrote a couple of books. One is called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, and then his newer book is called The Emotionally Healthy Leader. And one of the things that Scazzaro has been saying is that we've got to do something about this culture of busyness, where busyness has become this hallmark of status. That if we just stay busy all the time, if we act busy all the time, I mean, I've got like a whole text message chain full of, I was going to come tonight, but blank, blank, blank. You know, we are so busy, we don't carve out adequate time to nurture the soul and to spend time with the people that we love, because we're crazy busy. And when you ask people how they're doing, the first thing they say is, I'm so busy. Eugene Peterson, who just passed away, he used to say, I don't want a busy pastor. Because that means to me that person is not taking time to pray and to grow spiritually. And whoever's going to be my spiritual leader, I want that person taking adequate time to pray and to take their spiritual life seriously. I'm going to stop there. Thank you guys for coming, and I'll open it up for questions. And then obviously afterwards I'll sign any books that you have. So any questions on anything that I said or anything else that's somewhat relevant? Yeah.
Had a quick question about Blake. Is it Blake who's speaking at the Hutton?
Blake McMeans?
Yes.
Yeah.
Didn't you have him speak at the church?
He did. Yeah. He preached a sermon at Woodmont back in the spring, and and basically it was kind of a series on resilience, and he talked about how he's used his situation and brought good out of it. And so Blake does that. He travels and speaks all kinds of places. Questions, comments, criticisms? Yes, Jake.
What's your next book going to be?
What's that?
What is your next book going to be?
Oh, man. It really takes a lot of work to get books out when you're preaching and leading a church. So I don't know. I have to think about that, but there will be one at some point. But I'm not thinking about that in the near future. I made sure that this publication date was January 2019 instead of 18, because it was 16, 19. So we'll see if we can keep that same pattern. I'm actually trying to help Blake get his story written and published right now, because I want him to have a book when he travels and speaks. Yes?
Of the sections you mentioned in the book, which obviously you're passionate about all of them, but you had one where it was just like, stood out and you're really passionate about what one was it?
Yeah, I mean, you would probably think like the obvious section I would say would be Christianity or spirituality. I probably would honestly say the wisdom section, which is the first section. I believe that there's a big difference between wisdom and knowledge. I know a lot of really smart people who have a lot of degrees and read a lot of books and try to impress you with everything that they know. But there's a big difference in life between wisdom and knowledge, and not everybody can make that transition. Not everybody can take the knowledge that they learn from books and from schooling and degrees and translate that into wisdom. And I also think that wisdom is also comes from the school of hard knocks when you live your life. that we learn, along the way from mistakes and failures and shortcomings. But I guess if I had to pick one, I'd say the first one. That'll get you into the book, right? But yeah, I would say the wisdom section. John?
So you've always loved politics, and I'm just curious, not how your personal political views have changed, but how have your views on politics changed from when you were in college and seminary and starting in the ministry versus 11 years later having been in the ministry?
Yeah. I do like politics. A couple of quick thoughts. In the book, Preaching Politics, I have a section at the back that's kind of a personal story. It's called From the Right to the Left and Back to the Middle, which kind of tells my life journey. I grew up in Tennessee, conservative, went to college, conservative, seminary, Princeton, became a little more liberal. It was also during the Iraq War, and seminary students would definitely speak out against that. But I'm a moderate. I'm a centrist. If you cornered me and said, "Are you center left or center right?" I would tell you I'm center right. But I'm a moderate, and I personally believe that the world needs more moderates. Some of you've seen my diagram before. See Lee Barfield. I think I drew this for him on a napkin one time at Green Hills Grill. But if you think of a big circle in the middle, and then on each side of the big circle, a little smaller circle, and then on either side of those, two really small circles. This is kind of the way that I understand our culture. You've got the centrists, center left, center right, whatever. You've got conservatives, liberals. You've got neoconservatives and neoliberals. From my perspective, the problems in our culture lie with the neoconservatives and neoliberals who are always fighting. Now, having said that, one of my big disappointments with progressives, and I wasn't going to come to talk politics tonight. One of my disappointments with progressives in the 2016 election is they were disgusted, how could you elect Donald Trump? But they would not go and figure out the things that happened that led to the election of Donald Trump. They didn't want to read books like J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy or the Great Unwinding. They didn't want to acknowledge the fact that the political elites of both parties had distanced themselves from the working class, had ignored them for decades, which paved the way for Donald Trump to come in, and also Bernie Sanders too, right? Bernie Sanders was kind of tapped into that same anger, just on the different side of the aisle. So I guess to sum that up, I have a keen interest in politics and following it. I'm discouraged by the fact that it's become a blood sport. I don't know how any of these kids are growing up now with smartphones and videos and how they're ever going to run for office, because somebody's going to have something on them, and they're going to be, it's just going to be a smear job for all the time. So that's very discouraging to me, that the good people are deterred. I was telling somebody before, I think our state is incredibly blessed, and whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, I think Tennessee has a very long history of strong, very decent, well-grounded people that lead the state. I don't say that from a partisan standpoint. I was both, Bill Haslam endorsed this book, and he's been a good friend, and I know Bill Lee well. I think Bill Lee's a great man. I know Lamar Alexander endorsed this book. I know Jim Coper. I think he's a good man. So our state has been blessed with good people, and I just hate to see politics become so polarized and so toxic that good people don't want to run for public office. And that's what I think has been happening. Yeah, Chris.
Thanks for asking that question, John. So are you a northern Democrat or a southern Democrat?
Who said I'm a Democrat? Preachers can't claim parties, we know better than that. We know better than that. Yeah, Tom.
Clay, the decline in mainstream Christianity, church attendance, particularly with young people. Comment on that. Do you see anything changing that, or what can be done?
Yeah, so the mainstream Protestantism, it's basically, the Presbyterian Church, the Episcopal Church, the Methodist Church, Christian Church, disciples. We're a part of that, even though we're kind of a hybrid, of blend. But ever since 1960, we've had this steady decline in church membership and in church attendance. And a lot of that is the builder generation dying off. They're the ones that came back after World War II, built the communities, built the churches, right? And so as they age, their children, their grandchildren and great-grandchildren are not filling the pews. I've been critical of mainline Protestantism, and I've taken some heat for it because I have referred to what I call the intolerance of tolerance. That when people say, well, we're mainline Protestants and we're progressive, but we don't, that means we don't have room for anybody at the table who might be a fundamentalist or who might hold a conservative view on fill in the blank, right? So I think that Tom, it pains me that in mainline Protestantism, and I actually said this at a conference in Florida a couple weeks ago, it pains me that we don't have more big tent churches than we do. That a lot of the churches have basically reflected the culture, and they've either become, very liberal or very conservative. And so in Nashville, we still have some great, mainline, what I would call big tent churches. And see, I think that's healthy. I think anytime a church becomes full of all liberals or all conservatives or all Democrats or all Republicans, I think it's going to be problematic because life is complicated. So that's one thing. I think we need more big tent churches. The other thing that I think younger people are looking for, a couple of things, the millennials, I think they're looking to serve. They want to give back, so I think mission is really important. And I think that they're looking for authenticity. I got this from my dad years ago. I've never liked the stereotype of ministers. I've never wanted to be a stereotypical minister. I didn't want to marry a stereotypical minister's wife. I'm not going to elaborate on that, but I wanted to be kind of outside the box, and because I wanted to be real. I wanted to be real, and so I think giving people a place to serve, a place to be authentic. And then the other thing that I think the church has got to embrace, and I credit my stepmother, Ann Stauffer, with helping me see this. I think the church needs to embrace healing. I think if the church isn't a place where people can come and get their lives back together, whether it's 12 steps or divorce, the fact that the church used to kick people when they got divorced, that's when they need the church. And anybody here that's been divorced, the last thing you need when you're going through divorce is to be kicked while you're down. So I think embracing healing and providing an atmosphere where people can come and get their lives back together and be themselves and not feel like they have to put on a... Those are a couple of thoughts that I have. And I could talk on that topic for a lot longer, but I do think that there are some... I will say in Nashville, there are some churches that are doing this well, and I think that's good. I will take, one or two more. And then...
Say a word. Do you see this book as a good resource for discussion groups, small groups, classes, parents or grandparents trying to teach values to their children?
Yes, answer to all that. I think that in fact, the way I wrote it with short chapters intentionally, because I think that, I'm in a number of small groups. A lot of you are in small groups or Sunday school classes at your churches. I think that, it makes me happy when I hear from, First Presbyterian Church or some Baptist church in Gallatin that they use one of the Tennessean articles as a conversation starter in their Sunday school class. So yes, I do think so. I also think the way it's written, it can be used as a devotional book as well, because these are 500 to 700 word chapters that, you can knock out in a quick setting. And for whatever reason, we live in this culture where people's attention spans continue to shrink. And so I think that not having to, commit to many, many pages, being able to read a couple of chapters in a short setting is a good thing. So yeah, I think discussion groups, Sunday school classes, and then hopefully wisdom. One of the chapters, I'm not going to read it, but I'll tell you which one it is. There's a chapter in here, I think it's early on. It's in the wisdom section, but it's called Wisdom from Generation to Generation. It's on page 11. And so what I did, there's this men's group at Woodmont called the Geezers, and my dad leads them. And they meet every Monday afternoon. And I don't know what the average age is. I'm not going to guess. I'll probably offend them. But they're an older group, and it's the only group I've ever heard of that read a book a few years ago And then a few years later, they brought the same book back in, and they read it again, and nobody remembered that they had read the book 3 years ago. So I'm just going to put it that it was Richard Simmons' book, The True Measure of a Man. But anyway, I basically sat around the table with these guys, and I was leading the group, and I said, I want you to share with me your best life wisdom. What are the things that you want your children and your grandchildren to know, the things that you've learned over the decades through the School of Hard Knocks, in your careers, in your marriages, in your families? And I took that, and that's chapter 4. It's called Wisdom from Generation to Generation. So yeah, I think that hopefully this will help with that too. Let's do maybe one more, and then we'll start to wind it down. Yes?
Hi, I want to just say, first of all, you're a spirited young man, and you are so good to listen to and attention getter. And we came to Woodmont because I had read the articles in the Tennessean for several years, and you've yet to disappoint me. And reading your book, you don't just read one chapter, you've got to see what the next one says. So it's been a great read, and thank you for your inspiration to feel like there's a box for all of us, or a place for us all to.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that. I appreciate that. It'll be hard to top that question. Thank you guys for being here tonight. I'm happy to sign the book up front, and if you've bought it before, go buy one from Parnassus, make them happy. But I will say this: I'm so thankful that Ann Pageant opened this store, and that we have a local bookstore like this. I spend so much time in here; it's an amazing place. So thank you all for hosting. Come get some food and wine, and thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.